got to do with naturopathic medicine. So just play along with us for a little bit. How many of you have ever held a newborn baby? Okay. Go back to holding that newborn and tap into its essence. Not that it was crying because of the way it was jerked into the world, but the essence of the newborn. And put it in one word and give me your word.
Awesome presence.
Love.
Joy.
Innocent.
And I write innocent as inner sense.
Life.
Okay, any others? We got pure, awesome presence, love, joy, inner sense, life, beauty.
Pure energy.
Beauty, pure energy.
Sweetness.
Okay, that's a pretty good list. Notice that all of these are some variation on the theme of love. It's the stuff you're made of. And it is your beingness. It is who you are. I have a second question, and it's okay to answer this because I'm not going to ask for a confession. But how many have ever done something that now you regret that you did it? Okay. Go back to one incident when you did something that now you regret you did it, and think of what you were feeling that motivated you to do whatever it was you did. And put that in one word and give me that list.
Fear. Alcohol.
Fear, alcohol, anger, shame,
Terror.
terror, frustrated. Okay, so just so far we've got fear, alcohol, which alcohol is not a feeling, but I put it up there anyway. Anger, shame, terror, frustrated, ignorant, helpless. Anything else?
Hopeless.
Hopeless. And notice all of these are some variation on the theme of either hostility or fear. Offer that this is non-being. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and he's going to tell you how this has something to do with naturopathic medicine.
Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie. Oh. She's going to pass around the clipboard if anybody wants to stay in touch with us and what we're doing.
And there's also
We travel and teach 6 to 10 months of the year. All our travel workshops are done free, so the next invitation we head to Branson, we'll come back and do it again. But we usually actually do a full week series of workshops when we present something. Think it's going to fly again? Yeah. Well, here, then let's just drop this just a bit. There you go. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, sir. There you go. How many here have a device at home, in your car, in your shop, or your office that you can turn on without plugging into a proper power supply and it works? Anybody got a device that'll do that? What device do you have
That I can turn on with...
that will work without being plugged into a power supply?
Oh, well, it's a rechargeable battery thing that, yeah, ultimately it has to be...
So it has to be plugged into a source.
Eventually,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So has anybody got a device that works without being plugged into a proper power supply? Say again? If you take your battery out, is it going to work? It's got a proper power supply. If you take the power supply out of your phone, you're carrying it with you portable, but you got a power supply there. Without it, not going to work. There's no such thing as a device that does that. Now, the questions Jeannie asked, we've asked of tens of thousands of people all over the globe. And 100% of the time, when she asks a question about the newborn child, everyone answers with something that's some variation on the theme of love. Why? Because I'd offer, everybody knows what human life is. Human life is the awesome active presence of love. That little guy right back there, the first time you held him, how would you describe him? You got it. We were out in Washington State a few months ago, and we were invited into an alternative school, and it was a troubled kids, and these were kids from 15 to 17. Several of them had to leave school because they'd had babies and such, and Jeannie was doing this list. There was one little girl at the back of the room who was 16, and Jeannie's got the list, and she's got something to add to the list, and then she's so excited. And she says, and my daughters too, and all those words describe her, but they don't even start to say who she is. I would offer, your power supply is this. When a so-called human form functions without a proper power supply, I would offer it is in a disease state and cannot achieve, I don't care what it does, high-level wellness. If you want high-level wellness, I promise you it doesn't come from drugs. Although that's called health care. Nothing to do with health care, it's disease care. It's all about the diseases. If you go and talk to all the researchers going, you will not find one that has any interest in researching the cause of the disease if they're in the pharmaceutical field. They're looking for a pill with which to control symptoms and create a maintainable sales system to keep people hooked on their diseases. It's not health care, it's disease care. You can't afford, you can't make enough money to keep ahead of that system. Look at what it's eating up in our culture today. We have an industry in this, actually two industries that together spend $50 billion a year to tell you what to put, and your children especially, what to put in their mouths. And virtually none of it qualifies as food. And none of it qualifies as anything to do with healing. Oh, lots of symptom control, but nothing to do with healing. Until we understand the principles by which this energy system, if we listen to Einstein, Einstein says this, on such things as matter we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy, energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Einstein tells us matter does not exist. If matter doesn't exist, what do we have? We have an energy system, and there are certain energies that are natural to and support the function of that system, and certain energies that are unnatural to and will destroy the function of that system. Before it destroys the system, those energies make us stupid. In fact, there was some research someone told me about last week. I haven't followed up on it yet, that's showing that coffee makes us stupid, reduces intelligence. Now, if you look at the second question that Jeannie asked, and you look at this list, you'll notice the question she asked is, how many have ever done something they regretted? Obviously, if you did something you regretted, at the moment that you did it, you weren't plugged into a proper power supply, and you weren't very bright. You weren't very smart. Anybody ever destroy a business, a relationship, a piece of furniture, put a fist through a wall? Anybody ever done that? What state were you in when you did those foolish acts? Is there anybody who would say, oh, I was in this pure, awesome presence of love, joy, innocence, life, beauty? Anybody ever put their fist through a wall in that state? Or someone else's face in that state? Or rage at a child or a spouse in that state? Never happens. It is only when we carry within us diseases that show up as hostility and fear in us that cause us to function as non-humans. My offering is, you can't have high-level wellness And you are not functioning as a human if there is not the active presence of love in you. First order of business, if you want high-level wellness, is you've got to start on a campaign if you inherited or your environment has given you a variety of forms of hostility and fear. Now, there was technology on the planet that was well known 2,000 years ago for how to go inside of oneself and remove these things. The technology was called forgiveness. It was taught in a language called Aramaic. The Aramaic language, interestingly enough, is the root language of at least 6 of the world's major religions, though it is not a religious language. It has nothing to do with religion. It is a physics language. When you look at its roots, it is a psychological language. It is a genetic language. It is a physiological language. They knew exactly how this human energy system was designed to function. And when it wasn't plugged in, people were advised as the first order of business to clean up their hostility and fear. Now, what happened to those Aramaic teachings? They were turned around exactly backward when they were taken out of the Aramaic language and put into the Greek language. You'll notice that Greek philosophy and the Greek gods are all external. There's nothing about a power within in that teaching. It's all out there. And of course, the power to cause you pain and the problem in your life is out there. Has anybody here ever been in one of these states, fear, anger, shame, terror, etc., and started to talk about someone else and how that someone else was responsible for what they were feeling? Have you ever said to somebody, "You really made me mad. You really frightened me. You." Anybody ever do that? What is that called? Speaking out of a state where you have something going on inside of you and you talk about someone else is called denial. Denial is not a river in Egypt. It's what you and I do when we're having an internal experience. Now, we've developed a test in this work for determining whether or not an experience you're having is yours or not. It's an extremely difficult test to apply. It takes a very high level of intelligence and intellect to do it, but I've found that virtually everybody can do it once they understand how to apply this tool. How do you tell whether something you're feeling is yours or not? Are you feeling it? If you're feeling it, you know exactly who it belongs to. And if you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, you'll notice that you're the only one that was there every time. You got to start to recognize that those things are about you. They are not about someone else. And the mechanical way that you go into denial, and you can go back 2,000 years ago and look in the book of James, and it says, stop your denial. And then it explains why there is war. And it is because of our denial. Because our denial creates a stress within, and people hook the stress within into external events. Once you hook the stress within into external events, you can no longer resolve your disease. Guaranteed, you will go into a degenerated condition, and somebody will come along to sell you a pill with which to hide your disease from yourself and pretend that now everything is okay. And everything isn't okay. You'll notice that every one of those pills has what we have euphemistically been told are side effects. Let's investigate for a minute. If you go to the doctor and the doctor says you have the ABC disease, and you take those words, ABC disease, and you put them on an insert in a package, does that make it a side effect, or is it still a disease? Every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. Period. Every drug. Let's think about it logically for a minute. We have this toxic substance that if you put it into a healthy body, we know it will make the healthy body sick. And somebody wants you to believe that if you put it into a sick body, it will make the sick body well. Hello, is anybody home? Is anybody listening? Does that make any sense at all? It makes absolutely no sense. However, you can reinforce the state of denial by adding a chemical that helps to keep you hidden from yourself. And in so doing, you will exacerbate your disease process. What happens when you hook something that's internal to an external event, and you use words to do that, you have to hide a part of your mind from yourself. The part of your mind that you hide from yourself is your disease. And when you're in denial, that part of your mind is no longer resolvable. And you will have great difficulty finding it ever again in order to resolve it. What that's called when we enter into denial is a state of dissociation. In other words, once I deny something, once I'm in some kind of pain or turmoil, I'm unplugged from health. First principle of naturopathy. I'm unplugged from health if I have some form of inner turmoil, and then I try to put it on you. So now I have hidden my disease from myself. I make my disease unresolvable. Has anybody ever done a behavior, maybe one of these, and you said to yourself, well, man, that was terrible. I'm never going to do that again. Anybody ever do that? Or maybe you heard something like this based in we function as human beings. You go, hey, geez, that makes sense. I need to function as love. And you went home to that person who's the challenge in your life, and you said, you know something? You know what I learned tonight? I learned that we have to, in order to be humans, function as love. So from now on, that's what I'm going to do. Anybody ever do that? And that's what you did from then on, right? Until you got the look. And what happened when the stress was up and the chips are down? You went right back to the old gut level programming. And it was the same gut level programming that's been going on in your generations for 1,000 generations. There's a story in the Old Testament, not a religious story, about some people who were wandering in a desert. Think about it for a moment, folks. How do you get lost in a 30 square mile area for 40 years? Not easy to do. Now, you ladies know why it happened, right? Moses wouldn't stop and ask for direction, right? Mrs. Moses asked 2 weeks later. They were in the promised land. No, seriously, what did they say had to happen to get out of the desert into the promised land? They said the old generation had to die off. That didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the old causes held within your physiology that lock you out of your human life have to be removed for you to get to the promised land. What is the promised land? It is the land of living a human life. It is the land of conscious co-creation. Instead of unconsciously setting up those things over and over and over again, that we say, I never want to have to deal with that one again. I had the blessing about 30 years ago of getting to do some work with a gentleman named Marcel Vogel. Marcel was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. How many knew Marcel? I run into quite a few people who did. He was absolutely awesome. Marcel had a camera in his laboratory with which to take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. In other words, if I deny and dissociate from my fear, my anger, my shame, my terror, my frustration, my helplessness, my hopelessness, I have an energy in myself that I've hidden, and the more I try to squash it down, the more energy I put into it. The more energy I put into it, the higher the amplitude is of the wave that radiates out from me and into me. Marcel was able to measure that wave. I call it the psychic megaphone. If there's something that you don't want to deal with in your life, guess who's coming to dinner? Has anybody here ever had kids? Have you ever noticed that having a child is like having your unconscious mind hang out in true living color and Dolby sound? Everything you never wanted to deal with, they did. Why? It's because of this energetic effect. And when you don't want to deal with things, you set up a field. This whole structure of the energy system of life is set up to draw somebody in who will do it to you. And here's what happens when they do it to you. Their behavior resonates that which you have dissociated from. You have information in your mind, it fires that information, and you use that hidden information to produce your brain's image of them, and they show up in your mind with your problem attached, only now you're sure it's their problem. You made me feel. That is called projection. Taking the content of your mind and building images of other people out of it. You can't have high-level wellness if you don't resolve that issue. Now, I love the idea that Joanna started out with homegrown Missouri, getting people to start to grow their own decent food, providing it to themselves and to their neighbors. But you know something? You can have the most awesome organic food in the world, but if you eat it in this condition, you will toxify it in a heartbeat. What is needed is a tool with which to remove these dissociated parts of the mind that keep us in the cycle with people in our lives of finding somebody else to blame for what's happening inside of us. What the ancient Aramaic forgiveness work does is it shows you how to collapse. I had a marker here, or eraser here. It shows you how to collapse the projection, crack open the dissociated mind, and go directly to the root of what it is that needs to be forgiven in you. We need to stop forgiving each other. We need to stop forgiving ourselves. That's a Greek idea of pardoning that's been substituted for forgiveness. In the ancient Aramaic, the word forgive represents a tool with which you go inside yourself and you remove every disease-producing energy within you. That is the pathway to high-level wellness. That is the core pathway to high-level wellness. You'll stop blaming everybody else, and everything is going to change in your life when you do that. So it's not about forgiving them. Karl Marx is reputed to have said, if you want to destroy a culture, all you need to do is change the meaning of its words. Why? Because when you change the meaning of a word, you just disappeared whatever that word represented. In Aramaic, the word forgive represents a tool with which you go inside yourself and remove what never belonged in you, the primary dis-ease energy of your generations. It does not represent a tool for letting other people off the hook for what's happening in you. So when I say stop forgiving others, stop forgiving yourself, I'm saying we need to go back to the real forgiveness. Because if we don't ever find that real forgiveness, we have a cumulative multi-generational database called a body-mind unit that passes insanity on from generation to generation to generation. In the ancient physics language where they understood that, they said the sins of the fathers will be passed into 3 and 4 generations. Now that word sin is another one that the meaning's been changed of. In Aramaic, it's an archery term. It's got nothing to do with your identity. It's got nothing to do with something you should claim for yourself. It's got nothing to do with some horrible, terrible thing that you've done. The word sin is an archery term. When you fired at the target and you missed the target, the scorekeeper yelled sin. You're off the mark. That's all it means. So if I engage in hate and anger and fear and frustration and grief and pain, then I am in sin. I am off the mark. I've put an energy in that's going to create a dis-ease process in my structure that will ultimately become organic. I apply forgiveness to those dis-ease structures within myself, and I get to the point where I have no capacity left for any form of hostility or fear. I now can begin to function as a human and experience high-level wellness. Now, I'm not going to get into the forgiveness process tonight. That's not our purpose here. But you can go to www. In fact, maybe you want to hand out some cards. whyagain.org. And in the upper left-hand corner is a link that says Start Here. That Start Here link will take you into a total explanation of the forgiveness process. If you start into using that process, and it's simple, but it's not easy to use at first, and you need support, an hour a day you can talk to Jeannie and I 5 days a week by calling 646-200-4169.
And that's on the back side of those.
And that's on the card. That's our radio show. You can also go to our website, and there's a link so you can listen to it on the web. But you can call into the show and ask us questions on how the process works. We have an awesome community of people from all over the globe. We have people from New Zealand, from the Middle East, from Asia, from Europe, from all over North and South America, who call into the show regularly and are there to support each other in learning this skill of forgiveness. So again, we're not going to go to the how-to. We've got some other things to cover from the point of view of naturopathic medicine. But first and foremost, I offer, as a naturopath, this is number one. Without that, a structure filled with hostility and fear is a structure in disease. Now, the culture doesn't recognize it that way. It wants to wait till it gets down to some sort of an organic thing that they can point at that's so-called physical. Don't wait that long, folks. You don't have to. You can acquire the skill of learning to forgive, to remove from your structure the multi-generational tendency toward any form of hostility or fear. And you can be finished with that. There's a really awesome movie that we watched just this past week that is one of the best demonstrations of people who are efforting doing that in very real situations. It's on YouTube. I was actually very shocked when I went to YouTube and saw some of the comments about this movie on YouTube, with people using the foulest language you can imagine to describe these people that are efforting living as human beings. The video, you can watch it free on YouTube, is called Amish Grace. And it's about the event up in Pennsylvania back a few years ago where 10 children were shot, 5 of them killed, inside of a schoolhouse. And you see, though not perfectly understood and not perfectly explained, you see a group of people who are working and efforting, living as this in the face of something horrific. That's the kind of people that are going to change the world. That's the kind of people that are going to make a difference in the world, because when human life shows up, everything shifts and everything changes. It's a powerful demonstration of the principle that we're speaking about. Now, in the film, they're still talking about forgiving the perp who committed the murders, as opposed to going inside themselves. But they are alluding to, they don't have the words to describe the internal process, but you'll see several places in the movie where they do speak about and allude to going inside and cleaning up what's inside themselves. In the ancient Aramaic, the physics language, they said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. That's the principle of critical mass from physics. A little leavening leavens the whole loaf. I don't think they were talking about bread. They were talking about us as humans. When we can get enough actual human beings to show up, enough people without the capacity for hostility or fear, we are going to change the energetic dynamic through critical mass and change what's happening on planet Earth. You can't rage enough, you can't fear enough, you can't kill enough to put an end to war and an end to the insanity that's taken over humanity. You can begin to forgive and stop being an energetic vote for that within the energy system. And when you do that, the energy system starts to change. Now, once you do that, there are several things to pay attention to. And of course, with homegrown Missouri right here in Branson, Missouri, or Missouri as the locals call it. You know, when I first came to Branson, or not to Branson, but to Theodosia about 23 years ago, there was an old timer up the hill from us who had built the property, built the homes on the property we're on. And he was talking about how difficult it was to become an insider in the Ozarks. And he shared that he'd just been to a funeral of a woman who was 92. And this woman had come to the Ozarks when she was 3 months of age. And her friends, of course, gathered and they had a eulogy. And the eulogy started out with one of the locals who spoke about how even though Ethel May wasn't one of us, she'd come here when she was 3 and died in 92. This community that's coming together to support their neighbors in feeding themselves and nurturing themselves and taking care of each other is an awesome effort that I heartily applaud. And there are many things from the naturopathic system that don't make money for the industry that's spending $50 billion a year to make sure you make them money. Some of those things, of course, are food. There's an interesting, another video that we just watched a couple of nights ago called Farmageddon. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing how the so-called, what should I say? Well, I won't say. Whatever it is, agency that's supposed to be protecting us totally, completely creates fraudulent paperwork to go into people's farms who are doing nothing but raising organic food to share with their neighbors, taking their animals and destroying thousands of dollars worth of food under the pretense of the danger that it is, while all of the, disease processes that are happening, the food poisoning, that pretty much all of them are coming from the chain of animals put into the insane conditions of being tortured within our culture. But these people are going into small family farms with mom and dad and 3 kids who are raising sheep. They paid $5,000 an animal to bring them over from Europe. They spent 2 months in quarantine in Europe, and then they spent 2 months in quarantine in the United States. Perfectly healthy animals. There's a whole fraudulent paper trail as to how the agency came in with flak jackets and machine guns to take these animals and have them slaughtered and put these people out of business. It's time for us to wake up. That's something that needs to be done. Now, if that enrages you, I invite you to stop lying to yourself, because that can't enrage you. But if there's rage in you about injustice, it can sure bring it out. So the first order of business inside of the system we're talking about is, if there's something in your life that you're enraged about, get in there and do the work of removing that which compromises your intelligence. Rage defiles intelligence. Go talk to the people in the prisons. 90% of them were in some form of rage when they did the act that put them in prison. It makes us stupid. We're unplugged from our power supply. Don't go out and become an activist out of rage, because you are now a vote supporting that which you are struggling against. Become a human being, bring the awesome active presence of love to that insanity, and that insanity starts to heal. So once again, the first order of business is forgiveness work. And then start to take action out of the genius intelligence you were given as a human being to know exactly what needs to be said and exactly what needs to be done to bring correction. Obviously, the food we put into our structures is important. Now, I used to be in the food business. I used to have restaurants, steakhouses and lobster, and I used to think that was food. And then I began to study naturopathic medicine. And there's always been this discussion, is the human designed to eat meat, or is it designed to eat a vegetarian diet? Well, if you go and look in nature at all of the animals that are primarily vegetarian, what you're going to find is they have a tooth structure like yours. They have a digestive system like yours. They have a hydrochloric acid content in their stomach like yours. They have an eliminative system like yours. They do not have anything like carnivores do. First order of business, start looking at what you've been brainwashed to believe is food, and then recognize that food is something that grows in the ground and needs to be eaten as close to that state as possible. We had a young lady here last month who gave us a presentation on enzymes. If you take any food and you eat it as it comes from the ground, somewhere in the range of as much as 70% of digestion occurs from the food action itself, if it's properly chewed, within the first 20 minutes in the body, and takes no energy from the structure whatsoever. Now, we're brainwashed in this culture to drink, because when you drink things with food, it makes the establishment you're in money. It makes the so-called food industry money. It makes the doctor money. Think about it. I have a 50-cup tea urn over here. It's filled with water. I take a cup of tea and I pour it into the water. Would anyone expect to go to the spout and get a cup of tea out of that urn? No. It's been so diluted, there's no tea left in a single cup that comes out of that urn because it's been diluted. If I sit down in a restaurant or at home to eat and I have a big gulp, why do I have a big gulp? Because somebody told me I really don't have to chew. All I have to do is break it off and flush it down. Offense number one to digestion. If you don't turn your food into liquid in your mouth, it won't digest in any of your other stomachs. At Heartland, in our intensive workshops, pardon me, we do a 3-day juice fast as part of it. And one of the things we offer to people is chew your juice, drink your food. So offense number one when you got a big gulp is you don't chew. Most people don't chew. They just hit it and swallow it down. If they didn't have the water there, they'd choke to death. Second offense, the enzymes that digest the food, that are in the food, and the enzymes in your structure that are designed to digest food, work within a 2 or 3 degree temperature range. If you pour an icy cold big gulp on them, what happens to them? You just reduce their temperature to where they are useless in digesting food. Food begins to putrefy at that stage. Now, if it ever smells like something crawled up inside of your body and died, it's because it did. And your body is not designed for death to be and decay to be happening inside of it. So first offense, you don't chew with the big gulp. Second offense, it's usually icy cold. We need to wake up and recognize what's happening. Food has to be properly chewed. And because there are different digestive secretions for different types of food, they need to be properly combined. The worst food combination on the planet is the standard American meat and potatoes. You know, you can go virtually anywhere on the planet and adapt the local diet, and over a short period of time, and then in the long, you'll adapt to it, and in the long haul, you'll do fairly well. And I don't care if it's whale blubber in Alaska, I don't care if it's rice and beans, I don't care if it's pasta and vegetables in India or in Italy. If you go there and adapt that diet, you're going to do reasonably well. There is one dietary regimen on planet Earth that has proven to every indigenous population that comes and adapts it to kill them in a very painful way and prematurely for their, what would be considered their normal lifespan. It's called the SAD diet, the standard American diet. One of the reasons is because meat and potatoes demand opposing digestive secretions. One requires an acidic condition, one an alkaline condition. What happens if you put acid and alkaline together? You get neutral. When you've got neutral, do you get digestion? No. Pay attention to how you combine your food. It's important. Now, you may say, oh, I've eaten those meat and potatoes all my life. It's never been a problem for me. I have a cast iron stomach. Well, you know, you may have a constitution that allows you to do that. But the cost to your future and your generations is enormous. There's a system of looking into the inside of the human structure and telling how it functions called iridology. And iridology is a study of the iris of the eye. One of the things that you can tell with iridology is the constitution or the strength that a person has. I've had the opportunity on 2 different occasions to look into the eyes of 3 generations in a family. And in the first generation, if you look at the eye, the way you can tell if someone has a really powerful constitution is you look at the iris and you'll see that there are white fibers. And if the fibers are straight and close together with no openings in them, you've got somebody with what they call the constitution of a horse. That person can drink and smoke and eat the worst food in the world, and at 95 they'll die of natural causes. However, I've gotten to see this guy's son. Now, when you lose that constitutional strength, here's what the eye looks like. These fibers are crooked, and there are dark holes in between them. Guess what the son has? The son has all of the earmarks for degenerative disease, probably by the age of 55 or 60. Then I've gotten to see the grandson's eyes. And the grandson, the fibers are much broader, much more crooked, huge holes all over in the eye. That kid probably won't make it to 40 without degenerative disease. That'll be the young man that you hear about that was 28, great shape, he ran all the time, he was just, fit as a fiddle, and he was running and fell over dead on the spot. That's the eye of the kid that's going to happen to. In order to maintain your constitution, and the generational constitution, you've got to pay attention to what supports your structure. So that all becomes important. Next thing that is a major offense in our culture, because, there's a great line in the film Jerry Maguire, "Show me the money." Remember that line? Show me the money. Water is of key importance in how this human structure operates. At its peak, probably about 85 to 90% of the structure is water. Over time, because people don't eat drink the right quality of water or quantity of water, that is reduced. If you do some research on older people who go into the hospital dehydrated, most of them don't come out alive. If you look at the same demographic, age and disease process, and the person is hydrated when you get into the hospital, they come out healthy and alive. Hydration is of key importance. Now, there's a chemical that somebody bought the people who are doing things like we just talked about with the farmers back decades ago, and forced the buying of this in virtually every community in the country and putting it into the water supply. Chlorine has been killing people on this planet for almost 100 years. Do you know what chlorine was originally designed for? World War I, to kill people. It is still effectively doing that. Some medical researchers that I respect very deeply believe that, several of them, and more are getting on board all the time, believe that the reason why heart disease is the #1 killer in America is because people eat, drink, and shower in chlorinated water. And it's interesting, people who are kind of starting to figure that out are buying bottled water or are filtering their water, and they go get in the shower. Did you know that one 15-minute hot shower, you can absorb as much as 600 times as much toxicity as you would from drinking the same water all day? Hot water vaporizes the chemicals, they permeate the skin, and they're breathed in through the lungs. It is imperative that you at least filter your shower water. Now, you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and for 15 or 18 bucks, you can buy at least something that will take out the chlorine and some of the other chemicals that are in it. Ladies, if you've got a dishwasher at home, please, 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 you just tripled the offense when you put the chemicals in and mixed it with the hot water in order to get your dishes clean. And if you open your dishwasher while that thing is still hot, you just flooded your house with all kinds of toxic chemicals. And if you stood over that dishwasher, emptying it, breathing those fumes at the same time, you just took in a huge quantity of toxicity. We need to become aware of what's going on with our water supply. A whole house water filter is really a minimum, or if you're not on your own water system, if you're living in a city. It's just urgent to do. then the way that you drink water is important. Most people sit and they dilute their digestive secretions and the food so they don't get digestion. In the naturopathic system of things, you want to take in about a half an ounce of water per pound of body weight per day. But you don't want to do it while you're eating. Now, we have another industry that makes a lot of money that tells you, this is really an important meal to eat. You've got to eat dead animals and chicken zygotes for breakfast and fill your belly with some white bread. Then you've got a good start for the day. Well, one of my mentors was a naturopath named Paul Bragg. Paul Bragg was 17 years of age when he got tuberculosis and went to Europe for a nature cure. He was cured of his tuberculosis, that he was pronounced dead by the medical profession. And at 98, Paul, who ran 8 miles with his 108-year-old friend, 8 miles a day, drowned off a beach in Hawaii. I know some people who were there. And they said the reason that he was allowed to drown is everybody just laughed when they saw him flailing and calling for help and thought he was kidding, because at 98 he was considered in Hawaii to be the strongest swimmer on the beach. He actually was resuscitated after that drowning and 3 months later succumbed to a lung infection from that event at 98. Paul Bragg never put a thing in his stomach in the morning except distilled water. Now there's another industry, show me the money, that will tell you, no, you need to have minerals in your water. Well, because that's how you get minerals in your body. Well, I want to see you go over and fill your mouth with rocks and get the minerals into your body. Good luck. Not going to happen. All that mineral water is little rocks in the water. Little rocks don't get absorbed any better than big rocks do. Minerals have to go through a plant process. It's called chelation. And when the minerals are chelated, then the human body can use them. So distilled water, will it leach minerals out of your body? You're darn right it will. That's exactly what it's designed to do. It's designed to wash and flush out the toxicity. If you are eating a wide variety of whole organic foods, properly prepared, properly combined, properly chewed, properly digested, and properly eliminated, you can't wash out enough minerals with all the distilled water that you could possibly drink. But the people who sell the other stuff will tell you, no, you need the water with our little rocks. Foolishness. So the water that you put in your body is important when you drink it. Paul Bragg used to say you have to earn your breakfast. You don't get up and just fill your belly. And what you want to do is get at least the first quart of water into your system before you eat a thing. And give your structure at least a half an hour from the last sip of something before you eat. Now, if you're going to eat, the Orientals understood this. You sat down and you got tea with your food, right? What did you get? A little thimble full of tea. They understood you don't fill the structure with water while you're eating. So you don't drink within a half an hour before, and then depending how heavy a meal you've eaten, somewhere between an hour and 3 hours later, or if you're going to a buffet where you're eating dead chickens, dead pigs, dead cows, etc., then you want to make sure that you give yourself at least 4 or 5 hours, because that's how long it takes for the structure to break those things down. If you pour water in on top of the digestive process, then you just destroyed the digestive process. So arranging your day in a way that you can drink a sufficient quantity of water regularly, and one of the best ways I've found to do it, and Paul Bragg I believe was right on, and I haven't met anybody on the other side of the argument that at 98 is running 8 miles a day with his 108-year-old friend who says, drink that mineral water. So what you do with water is of key importance. It's urgent to understand how the structure works and how it needs to be flushed with proper fluid use. Do we need to take a quick intermission, a potty intermission, in order to move forward? Does anybody need for us to do that? Say again?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, well, if we need to, somebody want to put your hand up. So let's just do a little survey and see if there are any questions. Anything that I've said so far that anyone would like some refinement on or have any questions about or disagreement with?
Fluorine, what about the fluoride?
Fluoride? Yeah, fluoride?
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things that industry's really good at is if you got to spend a lot of bucks to get rid of it because it's a toxic waste, you can probably get Madison Avenue to package it and sell it to humans as something useful. If you look at the history of fluoride, it is a byproduct of, pardon me, it was a byproduct of the aluminum processing industry.